Our next speaker is Dr. Hobin Bar. Hobin Bar is a CP PhD from the Hebrew University, and he was involved in many starting biotech industry in Israel, in devices, in life sciences, and presently he's a consultant to the startup company in life sciences.
Yeah. Good morning. Actually, I was invited to give a speech, and it was really a great honor and pleasure to be here and speak, because I was planning just to have fun and listen to other people. But nevertheless, I'm very happy to be here and share with you my experience, and most of what you see here is actually the result of and the scars that I really carry on my body during 15 or 17 years of entrepreneurship and working with startup companies in the life. And the title is moving from discovery to startup, and the subtitle is tripping over the chasm. And later on, very short, you'll see why I think the second subtitle is more appropriate. We've had the definition for the innovation of discovery. This is one that I really like. Discovery consists of seeing what everybody has seen, but thinking what nobody has thought. And this is a word from a Nobel Prize, Hungarian Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1937, Albert von, I don't know how to pronounce Hungarian name, but it's Szent-György. Thank you. I should practice it because I think in the Baltics it's very useful. But having said that, it's not enough to have a good idea. It's not enough that you have a good technology or great technology sometime in order to make it a product or turn it into a company. And with the life sciences, as opposed to many other processes of entrepreneurship, even high-tech, and we sometimes used to mix the two or include them in the same way of speaking. With the life sciences, the process is very different. And it's very different because the starting point is very different. Again, as opposed to any other entrepreneurship process, like for example with the .com, the 2000 year, and nowadays with the IT and the cellular and the smartphones, it's enough to have 1 to 3 people that have a good idea, and with a few weeks and months, you got a startup, you have a product, you go to the market, and you're being sold for 1 billion just because you're on Instagram. It doesn't happen in life sciences because it relies on many years of research, as we've heard. So, and the scientists, the innovators, are people that are driven by the quest for knowledge, not for products most of the time. And they like to do it because they want to leave some impression on humanity by any positive impact, by any new innovation therapies, like we've heard today and yesterday, either a novel research tool, technological innovation, or even some products, maybe a drug or maybe a medical device. But nevertheless, we are trying to do this, and we have had during our visit in the University of Vilnius, and I know it again from my experience. When I started, I was a scientist, and I didn't even think about filing patents or developing products. I just wanted to do good science and publish and share this knowledge with the community. This is part of what we are being educated to do. And then I was facing, like this cute snail on the garden bench, I faced the gap and the chasm, which I didn't know what to do. I was wondering right and left and asking myself, okay, how can I do it and what should I do? And let's try and follow and try to help him. I'll do it quickly, just to give a brief. It was already described several times, but this is a brief and general overview and schematic one of the process. Starting with a great idea, on the right you see all the inputs, on the left the outputs. So you have to have a seed money, and just now we have heard from Dr. Darwish and David on the resources at the pre-seed money. At that point you have to have a brief and outline business plan. Then you'll be able to file patent or licensing patent. But again, remember yourself, when you were students or research students, you didn't think about filing patents. All you think or thought about is having the right paper in the right journal. In Israel, for example, we have the TTOs, and we've mentioned it, that trying to put some order in this process. And then 3 to 5 years later, you have a proof of concept. You can get initial investment. Again, I won't go into details to this, but what I'll try to do is focus mainly on this stage. And this is the entrepreneurial stage. And to see how complicated it is and what needs to be done and how it needs to be done in order to idea to become a startup, and a startup produce and develop good products. So this is the first attempt. You are willing to take the risk, but you're still a bit afraid and a bit cautious. You launch your antennas ahead and trying to do it all by yourself. But still you keep the balance at the back just in case. So the process is actually very structured. And if you do it by the book, you may have more chances to succeed and less chances to fail. But still, I think the ratio, and Lisa will tell you that I think the ratio is, and the odds are not that good. So if you don't do it structurally, the chances are awful. So you have the initial discovery, then you have to have a scientific proof of concept. Otherwise, if you don't have a solid scientific proof of concept, it will be a great story. It might be good to talk about it around the table at home with friends, but it won't be any good product. And then come the IP, and I put an emphasis on this because, again, we were not taught and we were not trained to file patents, but to share the knowledge. But it's wrong. You first have to file a patent, protect the IP, and then publish. Otherwise, you won't be able, because the assets at the end of the day for the investors or the partners is the IP. And then you have a structured entrepreneurial step. You have to have a business plan, and again, the interface between those two phases is like water and oil. Again, because the academy and the researchers and the people in hospitals and research institutions do not think about business. They don't care about money. They care about money for the research, but doing some money and selling, it's not in their mind. Then they have to bring in some people that do think through the money. You have to have project planning. Again, I don't know what is your experience, but from my experience, when you do research, you do not usually have planning. You do it actually almost by the day or by the week. You have the set of experiments, you summarize them, you draw a conclusion, and then you go further on to the next experiment. And sometimes you didn't even thought about it a day or a week before. So there is no planning. But if you want to have a startup, you want to have a product, you have to have a planning, robust planning of the development process. Again, I skip the animation, but moving forward, meaning to move out from the university, from the hospital, from the comfort zone of the research institution, and recognize and bring it to the business partner. But in order to do this, you have to recognize when a discovery may or may have not any commercial potential or value. And this is not that obvious. And analyze the market need and market potential. And again, we just heard yesterday from Adela with her tremendous and eye-opening lecture. There is a need, for example, for new antibiotics. But is there a market potential? Is it big enough? So it's not good enough that you have a market need, you have to have a market potential. And I just can give you an example, not from our business, but there was an Israeli company that developed a RoboMower. Have you heard about it? It's an automatic robotic lawn mower that do the work perfectly by himself. He can do it by the night that you're sleeping, and he can, at the end, drive himself to the cradle, and no problem at all. And they saw that there is a market need. Definitely there's a market potential for this. But is there a market need? And again, as Nissim just mentioned, we think as Israelis first about the US market. And they went to the US market. And they realized after a few months that the market penetration is too slow. They start to analyze what happened. And then they realized that the American guys do actually like to mow this by themselves at the weekend. Because at that time they can drink beer, they can talk to their neighbor, some gossip. But this technology finds itself today where, do you know? Anybody know? Exactly. Siemens bought the IP, and other companies developed a robotic vacuum cleaner. And it's a very successful one because nobody likes to do it. So there is a market need and there is the market potential, and these are not always overlapping or competing each other. And of course you have to strategize on your IP. It's not enough that you have a protection on your IP, you have to strategize this strategic process, how to protect it well, and I emphasize it in a minute. So now we are doing the next attempt, and you are being some more courageous, but you're still closing your eyes because you're not sure that there's something beneath you that will support you. And then we are coming, and here is the subtitle for my lecture, and as you see, it's taken, it's not mine, it is taken from a paper from Biotech Management from 2003. In biotech or in life sciences, again, as opposed to many other businesses or industries, besides the challenge of clinical development and the challenges of the regulatory needs and requirements, which are difficult enough, we have to go through managerial transitions. And that is because, and this is the chasm, the real chasm that we have to go through. And again, I won't go into detail, but this is a kind of, again, it was taken from the same article, which I find very illuminating. This is the graph that shows how companies develop, the life cycle of companies. On the left, you see the startup or the early stage company, which in terms of a focus, they are discovery, early development, and the numbers of employees is relevant to the American market, but nevertheless, not too many employees. Most of them are scientists with scientific skills. And then the managerial environment is more like a research group in university. And this is a startup, informal management, not too much identified tasks and roles, and then you have to go to the next step and start to be more structured companies. You have managers, you have R&D managers, you have project managers, you have CTO, you have CFO, and this is start to be inconvenient for most of us at the beginning. And I remember myself again, when I got into a company, it was actually before that, to an institution, a governmental institution, and there was a head of the department and project manager, and then under him there were a few sub-project managers, and I was down there. But I was a PhD. I managed my study, my research by myself, and here now I'm under a pyramid of management. It's very difficult. And this transition, I can assure you, kills many companies, mainly in life sciences, because the inventor, the scientist, is a boss for himself and for his group. But then when he has to interact with the company and with the investors and with the business development, it might be a disaster if you're not aware of it and you not prepare yourself for this situation. And again, if you want to do it right, you have to put professional management, otherwise it won't work. And I'm familiar with the situation that professors, and please don't take it personally, please do not be offended, but they know how to manage a large group of scientists in universities, but they're not thinking business-wise, most of them. Of course, it's kind of a generalization, so I apologize. But then you have to have management, internal management. Not less important is the board of directors that can see from upper level where the company should go. Again, because if the company is derived or managed by the scientists, they know how to do science. Not always they have the vision or the ability to look to the distance and see if this is the right direction. It might be the right direction scientifically-wise, technology-wise, but not market-wise, not business-wise. So you have to have a board of directors and scientific and later on a clinical advisory board. It must be connected to reality, otherwise it won't succeed. And then do market analysis. Obvious, no? Not all of us. You have to analyze the market and see how the market look like, the potential, the segments within the market, to which segment, who are the customer that will pay for your product. It's not that obvious all the time. Sometimes we think that the customer are these, but actually the one that gets the decision to buy the product and to pay the money is somebody else. We talk to doctors and hospitals, but actually the one that gets the decision is somebody in operations. Again, robust R&D plan, which looks at least 5 years ahead, not by the day, not by the week, not 6 months, at least 5 years ahead. Of course, it's only a plan that might be changed, and it's good to revisit it from time to time. This is part of the management, internal management responsibility, and of course, the board of directors. Business plan and financial plan. Financial plan is how are you going to pay for all this planning? How much money do you need? Who is going to, or who is the preferable investor? Is it private? Is it government? And how are you going to spend it? And when will be the next time that you'll need money, and how are you going to get it? The next stop. And this is always the case, because with companies in life sciences, you always in need for money. That's the case. You probably heard this phrase, elevator pitch. And this is if you can clearly answer the following questions. What is the problem or the need? And how you go and solve it, or meet this need? do you have an IP protection and freedom to operate? And again, it's one thing to have an IP, a strong IP, and the other thing is to have a freedom to operate. What I mean by freedom to operate, look for example on any developments around the PCR technology. You can have a very nice technology which is based on PCR, but then you face the patents, the huge patents of Roche, for example. So you have to know if you can either license those or if you can some way bypass those. And this is very important because you can get on the road, start to develop, you think everything is okay, but somewhere around the corner, some company might sue you for infringement of patent. And this is the freedom to operate. It's a bit tricky, this one. I won't go into more details, but you have to be aware of it. And of course, how to make money out of it. What is the business model? Do you have the right team to execute this plan? Again, you might think that you have, but you have to make sure that you have all the components and all the elements and all the people with the right experience to do it. And what do you offer to your business partner, be it an investor at the early stage, later on with the partner, the strategic partner? What do you offer? How can they make money? And sometimes the benefit is not only money, because people might invest and think that they feel good for many reasons. In our business, in life sciences and healthcare, it happens sometimes that people put money, they have some personal reasons why do they want to invest in this, and it's okay, like patient groups and everything. So if you can answer this in, say, 5 minutes, you probably have a potential for a business opportunity. And that's how, again, I won't go into details, but it should be translated eventually to a business plan, to a robust one. And the business plan describes the company, the need, the company solution, the technology, market analysis, the business model, the financials, as I mentioned, key team members, it's very important, and then the appendices, the market research, and you can find many other business plan that has some variation on this, but this is a tool not only to show or bring to the meeting with the investors, it's more importantly, or at least equally important, intern for the company to be focused and to know what to do, how to do, and when to change course if it is needed. So now let's see if it can go all the way. I think yes.
On the other side.
So remember, the impossible is often the untried, so don't be afraid to try. It's possible. And just to complete, this is a poster that was hanged in front of me during the entire PhD research that I've done. And since part of you at least read Hebrew, the rest maybe not, I try to translate it. And you can put yourself, these are stages in project management or company management. You start with enthusiasm, you then have some illusion that you might be the next Nobel Prize winner or the next Bill Gates. Then came the soberness, and then you start to panic. And this happens all the time. And then you try to look for the guilty people. And again, as always happens, you punish the innocent, and as always happens, you promote the blameworthy. And you can just move the flag by the stage you are positioned. Thank you very much.
Where is the perseverity and tenacity and some luck?
Luck is
no luck.
Luck is built in.
Any questions? Okay, just follow this science and get that's it.
My name is Efik. My name is Efik Stark and I'm coming from a large pharma, from Teva Pharmaceutical, but on the other end I also work in the small biotech. I think that one of the major challenges in the small bio is a lack of development experience. Lack of talented, experienced people. How do you see, although I know I've seen that Nissim has talked about the layoff of the major pharma, but I don't think that the small bio have the money or the abilities to hire these people. How do you overcome this issue?
There are two issues, I think, hidden in your question. One is the lack of drug development or product development experience, and I think we are experiencing this in Israel because we are a small country, and there is only one tiny Teva. With the other countries, in the United States, you may find a lot of big pharma that actually release, as Nissim mentioned, thousands of experienced people that can do, and as I heard once, the phrase boat people. You know what is boat people? When a company release those people, like people from a sinking ship, people are gathering on the lifeboats and start to establish companies, small companies, or joining other companies. In Israel, we have a bit problem, but I think with the time we are having more and more. And the other part of it is a lack of managerial skills. And this is true all over. Again, in Israel, probably here in Lithuania and in Baltics, it's the same situation. But because the market is small, because there are not so much, with the high tech in Israel, for example, it's less of a problem. With biotech, with pharma, you're absolutely right. What we are doing, and Marian didn't mention it, but I'm running a program, an MBA program, focusing on biomed management in the College of Management in Israel. So we are focusing, it's an MBA, and we are preparing our students to become managers in the industry, provide them with the tools, hopefully, with the tools, the right tools, to manage companies, because it's different, it's complicated. It's a different area, it's a different business. You have to have all the skills of a manager, finance, accounting, legal, and all the others, and marketing, of course, but there are those that you have to be skilled in regulatory, in quality management, in marketing into this business, which is different from marketing bananas. So you're absolutely right, and I think with the time it accumulated.
Thank you, Tori.
Thank you very much.